Today's teardown is on a rather highly requested engine. This is a BMW N63. It is a twin turbo direct injected Hot-Vee V8. This can be found in 5 Series, 7 Series, X5, X6, and some other letter number cars that I don't pay attention to. This core looks pretty complete. It's got all the red caps in it like it came right out of a salvage yard. It's got a wiring harness, it's got turbos, it's got injectors and coils. I'm hoping I do pretty well on it. I didn't pay a whole lot for it, so that's good. But I did note that there is a broken part of the bell housing on the block. Not from the transmission, but where the transmission attaches, there is some damage. So the block is going to be scrapped no matter what. I just don't know if that's why it's here, or maybe the whole inside is filled with all kinds of carnage. I'm not sure. All I know is I've been dreading this moment all week because I'm not looking forward to taking this apart. I'm sure you guys are ready to watch me rip bolts out of it, but this is the first of these that I've ever taken apart, and like anything that's kind of complicated and you've never done before, we're going to learn today. We are going to learn. When I talk about a Hot-Vee V8, that means that the exhaust side, the turbochargers, are in the valley of this engine where your intake manifold would normally be. And where the exhaust manifold would normally be, you have your inlet or intake manifold. And outside of that, the rest of this is kind of like standard hardware. I'm not really quite sure what to expect when I pull the turbos or the intake. I don't know what's wrong with this engine. All I know is there's a lot to it. These engines are absolutely notorious for having problems with the valve guide seals. It's so much labor to replace the valve guide seals that in most cases it is cheaper to replace the entire long block, which is just insane to me. It's just crazy. But that's what a lot of those cars got. If they were diagnosed with bad valve guide seals, they got a replacement long block, which I guess that fixes it. But they were very complicated looking. I don't know how hard this is going to actually be to take apart. So we're going to start pulling the coils, we're going to pull the plugs and see what the plugs look like, and then maybe we'll try to turn it over and see if it's locked up or see if it spins over well. Well, I'm surprised, but I don't see any damage to the plugs. This plug here is pretty gnarly looking compared to the rest of them. The rest of them look what I'd expect to out of a higher mileage BMW engine. Next, I think the next step is going to be to pull this wire harness, the coil harness, and injector harness off, and then we'll go ahead and get the injectors and the high pressure fuel pump off this side, and rinse and repeat for the other side. Progress! Finally! The N63 uses the same style of fuel injector as an N54, and thankfully for me, it looks like this has a set of Index 11s, which is pretty good. I'll be able to sell them for some pretty good money. I'll definitely make money just on what I paid for this engine on the injectors, which is, I'm happy at this point. That is fantastic. We're going to go ahead and get the feed lines off and get the injectors pulled. I lied. Actually, we're going to pull a high pressure fuel pump next. That way I can get the supply line for that out of the way and have access to the hold down for the injectors for the front 2 cylinders. Now it looks like I have 2 5mm Allens and it'll be out. Alright, there's one high pressure fuel pump. Now we have access to the 10mm that have the hold the injectors down. These aren't too bad to get out. We're leaking fuel, so hopefully we don't go up in flames. That would be bad. These injectors just need the right amount of pressure at the right spot. Got one that's fighting me pretty good. change up what we're prying on. I know there's a tool for this. I don't own it. I should. I guess I've done enough of these now. Well, I can't get this injector out yet. We're going to spray some stuff in there and let it soak. Hopefully it breaks up some of that corrosion, and we're going to move on to the other side. I don't need that wrench anyway. Actually, I do need that wrench. Here we are on day 2. I basically went home last night after these 2 injectors wouldn't come out. I sprayed some stuff in there, some penetrant, and with some proper prying, now they will come out. I mean, okay, I got it a little further than that before I started the camera, but it's out. All the injectors are out now. All right, let's try to fight the rest of this harness off of here. There's just so much stuff here. We need to get all of this harness out of the way so I can see what I'm working on. And we can get the turbos off. Hopefully that's the next step. Oop, broke that. God, there's so much to it. Can you imagine if you put something in the wrong order? How much work that would be to fix? Well, I can't even get the harness off until I get the intake manifolds off. So, I got the intake left to do. Now it's time we start taking the turbos off. We're going to start getting some of these shields out of the way. Now we're going to start pulling the turbos off. We're going to pull the oil feed off first, and then we'll get the coolant pipes and the coolant feed in return, and they're ultimately V-banded to the exhaust manifold. Yeah, we didn't need that. Oil feed is out of the way. Next, I'm going to get the V-bands off. That one was loose. Now it's just the oil return, it looks like. It's the only thing keeping this turbo on. And that looks like fun. I know it's hard to see, but both the oil returns come to this area here in the valley. And it looks like I've got some specialized T30 bolts that I have to figure out how to get out, which I think we can get those out. But this has to be a ton of fun in the car. Thankfully they weren't very tight. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I guess it doesn't come all the way out. You just loosen it, and then there's another one straight down here. I guess those bolts are captured. There's one. Oh, let's get the other one out here. And there's two. Let's take a look at these things. Well, it seems to spin okay. No shaft play, nothing to speak of anyway. A little bit of wastegate rattle, but I didn't really know that these had that problem, but apparently they do. You can see play there. But overall, these still look pretty decent. Take a look at the other one here. These are actually pretty good size for being two of them on here. This one's much tighter, a lot less play. No damage to the impeller. Everything looks pretty good. I think I'll be able to sell these. Cool. All right, let's keep continuing. We'll get this, looks like a coolant crossover pipe out of the way. This is pretty dirty here. Clear, this was leaking for a bit. Now you can see the design of the exhaust manifold. It's pretty compact, really. They fit a lot in here. We're going to get these shields out of the way, and then we're going to get the exhaust manifolds off. Huh. Does that not come off? It has to come off. It's really strange looking at exhaust ports in the valley, I must admit. We're going to keep going and remove this valley pan cover here. I think there's some bolts here. Wow, that looks interesting. Here is the oil feed right here. You got your two feed lines coming from it, and this is the oil drain block from the turbos. And apparently these are notorious for leaking oil. This one clearly wasn't leaking any oil whatsoever, spotless. But when they get really bad, this valley will fill with oil. And apparently if it gets hot enough, it'll smolder. I don't know if it'll actually burn a car down. Now let's see if this thing will turn over. There's no plugs, no injectors. Oh, it sounds bad. I hear all kinds of weird sounds. Get out of here. Harness? I'm hearing some pretty bad sounds from the driver's or passenger side here, but it could be some plastic broken off from the oil fill in there. We'll find out when we get the valve covers off. Speaking of, let's get the valve covers off. Let's start with the driver's side. Well, that's not a good sign. Why is that here? supposed to go here. Let's put it back, it'll fix it. Well, we're already onto some things. Look how much slop there is in that chain. And if you look at the valve cover, it's clear that the chain has been rubbing on the valve cover. That's not just from me turning it over. It's probably from a yard cranking it or it actually running or attempting to run like that. Time for the passenger side. No. Okay, that bolt's unhappy. Yep. Okay, let's see what kind of hidden treasure lies behind this door. Well, this is broken too. There's a missing piece of guide there, and I could probably just slide this one off with my hand. Oh boy. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this vacuum pump off really quick, get it out of the way. Now it's time to pull the passenger side fuel rail and then the intake manifold. 11. Is that it? No. There's one glaring here in the corner. There's one at the very front. Alright, there's the intake manifold. Pretty strange piece. Now I can finish getting the wire harness off. Another T30. Oh, that's nice. Get out of the way. Next we're going to get this boost control solenoid pack out of the way. And now we'll get the Vano solenoids out of the way so the chain can slip past. I don't see a bunch of metal on the screen, so that's a good sign. Here you can see the broken chain guide on this top rail here. Probably, well, there's a little bit of tension on this side still. All the slack is on the driver's side. But we're going to go ahead and get these cam gears knocked loose, and hopefully we can get the head off without pulling the cams. I think these need a little nudge. I seem to have gotten myself in a predicament. That makes a difference. We are so close to getting the chain off. I swore this would work. Yes. Success. There's another chain rail this bolt holds, which apparently is very tight. There's a guide bolt there. I don't think there's any others. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's any others. Go ahead and start zipping some head bolts out and see what it looks like underneath this head. All right, we're gonna go ahead and pull the passenger side cylinder head. There's a couple E10 head bolts at the very front. And get those out first. They are E12s. Well, I'm just going to go ahead and pull the head. Hopefully this comes out okay. Well, I have my doubts. Really have my doubts. There we are. Now I think I can get it off. Well, maybe. Might have to pull this part off the front of the cylinder head. Let's get that out of the way and see if that's what I have to do. Let's get this plate off. Oh, cool. I can get those bolts out of the way while I'm in there. And then I got a chain tensioner right there. Let's get that out of there. There we go. And then now I think we can come out. Well, to me this looks like it's been off before. It looks like it has a non-original surface, like someone's hit it with a DA sander, you know, because that's the right way to do it. I don't see any major damage, just a bunch of dirt and debris in here. Nothing horrendous. But this engine could have had valve guide seals done, and that's why the heads could have been off. The head also looks similar, like someone attacked it with a DA. It's not really a way to resurface a head, but a little bit of marks on this combustion chamber, but nothing. I don't think there's any actual damage here. The cylinder walls look really nice. I don't see any damage at all. Let's do the same thing for the driver's side. Let's get the fuel rail off. And the intake manifold. And one last connector and the harness will be free. All right, now we'll start peeling this side apart. Let's go ahead and get the solenoids out, just like the last one. And again, no real metal on here, so that's a good sign. Now I'll get this plate off. And next we'll get the timing chain tensioner out of the way. All right, now we're ready to get some head bolts out. Let's get the front head bolts loose first. Leak a little bit of oily stuff. Fighting me a little bit. Oh yeah, I forgot to pull the chain rail. Forgot about that. That would be why. Hopefully this head just doesn't go bombing off of here. I don't think it will. Come on, let go, head gasket. Ah, what a jerk. More of the same story on this side. Lots of dual action sander action. Dual action sander action? I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. But the cylinder walls all look good. I don't see any damage to any of the pistons. It's clear to me that there was no piston to valve contact, so that's good. I did, however, when I pulled that head, pull out a massive broken piece of guide. This is off of one of the guide rails, and I don't know if I broke this turning this engine over or if this was broken and then it just needed me to pull the head. But there's another broken piece, Oh, it definitely needed these guides replaced. They're super fragile. I mean, they just crumble in your hand. Same story with the cylinder head. It's been resurfaced, but I don't see any damage. Just a lot of carbon buildup, but nothing out of the norm. All right, now let's get the crank pulley off. That one is unhappy. That one is also unhappy. I've got the snap ring off. I think that's aluminum. Wow, that's one hell of a crank bolt. The question is, do I need a puller to get this off? Or does it come off on its own? They wouldn't make me get a puller. No. This will just come off. Yeah, it'll come off. Boop. Now let's see if we can get the water pump off. There's the water pump. That one is not shaped weird at all. All right, let's get this belt tensioner out of the way and then we'll pull the timing cover. Okay, let's get this timing cover off. Okay, I think I've got all the bolts out of the timing cover, so this should just slip off. It should just slip off. There we are. Oh, I see problems already. Here's all the timing chains. Looks like they were getting wrapped up. That doesn't need to be there. That's got a partially broken guide on that rail. I gotta get those unbolted. All right, let's get these two guides off here. Look at that. Where's the rest of that guide? The rail's missing the guide from here all the way up. These pieces are just kind of, well, this one, that's a adjustable one. It just floats where it needs to go and it breaks into pieces as needed. So that one's junk. Let's see what this one looks like. That one's still in one piece for the most part. This is the scary part. I think I know this is why this engine is a core. Oh, I just lost it. But there's a piece of chain guide that went and fell into the rest of the pan, and I would imagine we're going to find a bunch of pieces in that pan. Well, before we flip this clown upside down, we're going to go ahead and pull this tank. I believe this is a vacuum storage tank that actuates the wastegates. There's the wastegate solenoids. It looks like it's all teed off up here. It's a couple T30s, and that should come right out. Kind of interesting piece. Now we're going to flip this thing over and make a mess of my floor because that's just what we do here. Oh yes, I guess I should probably pull the stop out of there. That is also just water and not coolant. First things first is pull the lower pan off. Nothing too terrible, it's just dark. I don't see anything major in the pickup yet. Wow, I didn't realize that there was a rear chain driving that oil pump. I have to pull the oil filter out, and there's a bolt behind it. Cool. That is pretty gross. I see bolt bosses, but I don't see where the bolts are yet. I know it may be hard to see, but there are actually 2 bolts that were hidden by the oil filter housing. That's the first for me. In order to get the pan off, I gotta pull the oil pickup out of the way. On this engine, the oil pump is at the back of the engine. This gasket out of the way. We're gonna go ahead and try to get this off of there, and then we'll pull the oil pump out. Take the oil pump gear off. That might be the wrong way. It was the wrong way. Huh. And now we'll go ahead and get the oil pump out of the way. Here. And there's the oil pump. Now we're going to turn it over and see how it feels. Actually feels pretty good. Let's start getting rods and pistons out. Bearing looks okay. One looks all right to me as well. Easier to get them out 2 at a time. Okay, 2 more. Here are the rods and pistons out of this N63, and it's important to note the unusual shape of the connecting rod. It's similar to some of the diesel stuff I've torn down, where the flange is off-centered. They do that so that they can fit the rod, this part of the rod, through the bore when they're assembling it. Otherwise, on a small bore engine, this would be wider than the actual piston. The bearings all look pretty good. They do have some signs of wear. They're not terrible. You know, these engines are notorious for leaking oil, so it was probably run low a little, at least enough to cause some bearing wear, but not terrible. I don't think that's what put this here. For better or worse, I've moved the engine off the stand and put it on the front of my forklift. This is why I don't like taking engines apart on a stand. The stand always blocks access to something. So we're gonna go ahead and pull this rear main seal plate off, and then we'll get all the mains out and pull the crankshaft. Cool, more oil. I also want to point out this is where the block is broken. I think this is the starter mounting area, and that makes this block completely useless, which means we don't have to save any of the bolts for, or any of the hardware for the main caps. We're just going to go ahead and buzz them out. All those bearings look pretty decent too. Guess I should save those, huh? All right, let's go ahead and pull the crank out. All the main bearings actually look pretty good. I don't see any signs of damage whatsoever. This is pretty good. This is the best part. The crankshaft looks pretty much perfect. There's no scoring, no grooves, obviously we didn't think that it was an oiling issue. We didn't see anything at all that would denote an oiling problem. But this crank is worth at least $700 or $800. I've seen some sell over $1,000. So this is a very, very good piece. Well, it's pretty clear why that engine was a core. I think the timing chain guides fell apart. That engine probably made a ton of noise. I mean, it was likely pulled out of a wrecked car. A salvage yard sold it, which is why I saw a heat tab on the block. They put it in a car. It made a ton of noise. They pulled the engine back out, sent it back to the yard. It got tossed around a bunch, and then I got my hands on it. And I think somewhere in transit is why the block was broken. That's a pretty weak spot of the block when nothing is bolted to it. However, in the car, I find it pretty unlikely that that's the part that's going to break in the event of an accident. So I don't think a wreck broke the block. But I did get a lot of really good parts from this engine. I got a set of Index 11 injectors, which would be a really good sell to an N54 owner. Probably won't last longer than this video will be published. And then I've got a good crankshaft that's worth a ton of money, probably the most expensive part out of that engine. And who knows what else I'll be able to sell out of it. Maybe I'll be able to sell the high pressure fuel pumps. The turbos have a little bit of value, but they are actually pretty cheap new. That engine was not as bad as I thought it would be to take down. I mean, the injectors kind of fought me on the way out, and there was a lot of different tooling to take that engine apart, but it all came apart pretty easy. I'm not gonna lie. I hate to say this, I think it was easier to take apart than that N55 was. However, I personally would never own a vehicle with this first iteration of N63 engine. A 9 to 13, you couldn't pay me enough to do it. And I own some terrible cars. I own cars because other people hate them, and I would not own an N63 powered car. Maybe a 14 and later, or maybe the third and fourth generation of this engine would be a lot better, but not a first generation. I don't think they're very good. All I hear are horror stories. If you'd like to buy parts from this engine or any of the other engines I've torn down, I'm going to leave our email in the description. And as always, I love all the comments, the criticism, the feedback. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.